Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to our information session on the Academy on the First College Year. My name is Stephanie, or Steph, as I like to go by, Foote from the Gardner Institute, and I'm joined by several wonderful colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. You probably heard the recording. We're recording this session, and we'll share out a copy of the recording and slides with you afterwards, so feel free to circulate that to your colleagues if you wish. And because we're a small group, we'll be very happy to answer questions as we go, if there are any. So feel free to unmute or put your questions or comments in the chat. We'll also have time at the end. So if you'd like to ask any questions that you don't want recorded, let us know, and we'll be happy to pause the recording and respond to those at the end or during the presentation. So let me go ahead and get some introductions underway. Colleagues, would you like to introduce yourselves, I should say? Cindy and Felita?
So I may go first this time. Good evening, Felita Williams. I'm the Senior Vice President for Programs here at the Gardner Institute. And I have the privilege of being one of the team members for Academy of the First College Year. My work experience extends from access institutions to system level work, and over more years than I want to admit, so I won't say how many years, but I've been at the Gardner Institute now for going on 3 years. So I would love to ask our participants that are here. I love we have a Jenny and a Jennifer. What do you hope to learn from the Academy of the First College Year?
I'm certainly familiar with the Gardner Institute, and I've been to several conferences. I am
I think she just froze.
experience,
Okay.
and just wanted to connect and see what this was about, and if it would be a useful resource for us as we rethink our first year experience.
Okay. And us, where are you?
Oh, at Assumption University in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer Hayes, I can't see Hayes Huggins. Are you able to unmute and say what you'd like to? I'm sorry, having audio difficulty. I can hear you, but I'm unable to speak. Is that Kankakee Community College? I know I just learned that.
I think it's Kankakee.
Kankakee Community College. Thank you. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you now, Cindy.
Hi, folks. So nice to meet you. Cindy Kane. My role with the Gardner Institute is brand new. Been with the team since June, but my prior experience with the Gardner Institute was as a campus participant in a lot of the work when I was at Bridgewater State University. Over time, my roles have involved both academic and student affairs positions and occasional teaching in the higher ed administration program. But the common elements are all related to the importance of framing institutional work to advance student success. So I'm thrilled to be here in this new capacity. My institution participated in the Academy on the First College Year, and I remember how well it brought our colleagues from different places on campus to the table for the first time, really. And it launched some really important conversation from there. So I'm super excited to be part of the team going forward.
Thank you so much, Felita, and thank you, Cindy. And thanks, Jenny and Jennifer, for sharing as well. I have two other Gardner Institute colleagues who are with me today. Katie Locke, who will be speaking in just a little bit, telling you all some more logistics. There's Katie waving about the application process and fees, and then Brittany, who is serving as the moderator. So thank you to you all. So a little bit about the Gardner Institute. We're actually just about 26-year-old nonprofit organization. And as you can see on this screen, we have a commitment to teaching, learning, retention, and completion. And this academy, rather not institute, this academy helps us as an institute to actualize our mission, to support institutions as they support students in their mission to graduate students. So for student success, this is essential, the Academy on the First College Year, because you all know how important the first year is. So that's really the relationship between this work and the mission of the Gardner Institute. Also, you may know that one of our co-founders, actually both of our co-founders, have a long history of being related to the first year experience movement, John Gardner and Betsy Barefoot. So it's also carrying out the legacy of our two co-founders. So here's the team. These are your facilitators. So Cindy and Felita and I are joined by Dr. Sarah Stein-Koch, who's unable to be with us today, but she's another important member of our team. And we're excited to work with this academy. We've been working with it. I think Felita and I have been working with it for a while now. I forget when we actually started doing this work. It's been a little while, but each time we do it, it's different and exciting. And a lot of that is, dependent on the individuals that we have and what their goals and objectives are. So we have content, but we really try to meet you all where you're at, which I think is a very important part of this experience as well. So on the screen in front of you are some artifacts. I'm not a historian, but I have a deep respect for history, particularly history of higher education. And I think that this is relevant because these are artifacts from a long time ago, but they're still important today when we talk about the first year. So when we think about the opportunity associated with this academy, I promise we don't go back to the tome and read, the tome of the first year experience, although we could go there. But I think it's important to acknowledge the past and to think about how it's informed the present. And if you're like me, I find over and over again, I'm reminded of how relevant what happened in the past is today in the present moment. So on the left-hand side, there's a preface, and this preface came from the book, The Freshman Year Experience, which was published in 1989 by Upcraft et al. One of the co-authors was John Gardner. And in this preface, I think it's particularly important to think about this not only in the moment, but today. This part of the preface that I want to call your attention to says, because retention research tells us that the first year of college is crucial to college success, we need to know more about who freshmen are and why they stay or leave. And believe it or not, here in 2025, we're still trying to understand why it is that first year students stay or leave our institutions. And so I think that this is important and it undergirds the work that we do at the Academy. So understanding better who our students are and what motivates them to stay or to leave our institutions. On the right-hand side is something that I cited in my dissertation a long time ago that I wrote about the first year experience. And it's sort of a historical piece published in 1928. And in it, it documents the outcomes associated with the first iteration of first year seminar courses. First year seminar courses have been around since the late 1800s. The credit-bearing version of the courses have been around since the early 1900s. And this publication documented some of the outcomes associated with that. And I bring this to your attention because, again, as we think about these courses, which comprise part of the first year experience or part of the first year of college, there's a long history in American higher education of these courses. They didn't just pop up. They didn't even just pop up in, the 1970s, 80s, 90s, or early 2000s. So they have a long, rich history, and there's so many different examples of the courses, of iterations of first year experience that we draw on and from. So we look at the past and we look at the present. And in this academy, we try to share with you all of those types of examples that will hopefully inform your thinking about what you might do to help support first year student success at your institution. So Felita has already helped us to get to this question. You all have shared why you're here today. To learn more about this academy and to make some decisions about whether or not it would be a good experience or the right experience for your institution at this moment. But I would also invite you to think about why you're compelled to consider this. So why is it that you might want to do something around the first year, and what sort of outcomes or goals might you have? Are you thinking of improving retention, belonging, engagement? Are there particular objectives that you have that you're hoping might be met through this experience? And I would invite you to share if you want to in the chat, or if you want to unmute and share with us, you could do that as well. So I'll give you just a moment to think about your why and what you might hope to get should you decide to join us for this experience. I know these are big questions to throw out on a Monday afternoon. All right, Jenny said, I think you hit the big ones for us: retention, belonging, and engagement. Yes, yes, and yes. I think that's what drives most folks to join us, and I can certainly understand why. I think those things are all at the top of our minds when we think about improving the first year. And Jennifer said, we have a first year seminar and have many initiatives that are considered part of a first year experience, but we're not strategic and organized, looking for some structured guidance. And that's actually one of the reasons that institutions come to work with us and join this academy, is to think about how they can take an intentional and coordinated approach to the first year. And when we were conceptualizing this academy, that was one of the sort of the ideas behind it. Like, we could help institutions to really understand the landscape of the first year at their institution and who is involved, and then just take an intentional and coordinated approach, creating capacity. So you have representation from the various different areas that are involved and have a stake, and then, follow that. So implement, this more coordinated effort moving forward. So how can we bring the things together, bring the people together, and really take a more institutional approach, so we're not competing, but instead we're collaborating toward a common goal. Great. You all are so good. It's a small group, but you're very participatory. I appreciate that. So a little bit about our academy, because at this point you might be wondering, how is it that they're going to help us do all this? Well, the answer is, we're going to do what we can in a short time. This is a very limited time that we'll have together. But given what we've done in the past, we know that institutions can have really, I think, important outcomes from this particular experience. There's a lot that can be accomplished in a short time. So this academy is designed to engage a team. So you would, if you're interested in this, you would get some of your colleagues together, and we can talk about who should be a part of your team. But you would form an institutional team, and you would look at your first year. And so you would look at that from a lot of different ways. We need to better understand who our students are and how they identify. We need to look at what's happening at the institution, and we also need to think about what some of the experiences are that we currently offer and where some of the gaps are. And you prepare a plan to plan, which essentially helps you to identify something that you can act on and begin to implement change around. Because we know we can't redesign the entire first year, but we can identify places where you might want to focus initially. So better understanding what's happening, who's involved, and then identifying a particular focus. So a little bit more detail about that. So I think of this academy as sort of a short course, because you start off with some of the foundational theories and practices to understand better, what the first year experience is, who's involved in it, what impact it has on student success in the first year. So all of that is at the foundation. And then you look at things like gateway courses and first year seminars, co-curricular experiences, and think about what you're doing currently, but also what some of the best practices are and what some of the research is that supports these different activities, other high impact practices in the first year. And then you go through this process for every module. You look at what you're doing and you think about, what you could be doing differently. So you create ultimately this plan to plan. The plan to plan helps you move into the next phase, where you would draft a full plan and then move into implementation. So it helps you to kind of make something that could be really big and daunting and take it into like a bite-size sort of scenario. So you're not trying to do everything all at once, but instead focusing on the steps that can help you to get there. So each section of the plan requires collecting some information, having conversation on your team, and also talking with others, collecting data, and thinking about, what improvement might look like. So this is, I think, very helpful when you think about trying to create institutional change around some of the ideas that we've talked about already. So now you might be wondering who should be involved in this team, and you may have some ideas in mind. But these are some different areas in which we suggest that you consider participants. So thinking about who might be on your team, you might reach out to faculty who teach introductory or gateway courses, first-year seminar programs, seminar leaders and staff. Institutional research officers, we've had several of them who've been a part of our teams, and they've been fabulous to work with because oftentimes, we'll have questions, teams will have questions about institutional data, and they'll be able to respond and provide the data that they're looking for. Chief academic officers and their staff, students who are involved in institutional redesign efforts, peer leaders, peer mentors, other student staff, deans, department chairs, and I'd like to say anybody at your institution who cares about the first college year. So that could be anyone in any functional area, but somebody who is passionate about first year students, has ideas, maybe has contact with first year students, they can be involved in these teams as well. Ideally, the teams would be at least 3 to 5 members, and you can have actually up to 15. So if you had a lot of folks that were interested in joining you, you could have up to 15 members of your institutional team. And then you would participate in synchronous meetings, and then you all would engage with asynchronous content and have separate meetings as well to talk about the different aspects of the plan to plan. So that way you're learning about information with us, and you have team time also with us, but you have time then to process it and share with each other as well. So a little bit more detail about what people have done in this academy. And we have been doing this for a while, so we have even more things that I have on the slide. But just to give you a sense of the kinds of areas of focus that folks have worked on related to the first year. So I mentioned before, I think it was Jennifer who said, we'd like to take a more coordinated approach. So we want to be intentional and bring together lots of different areas because we have a lot going on in the first year. And that's one of the things that people have focused on in this academy. So the coordination of support and structures to welcome and engage first year students or first semester students. That's something that people have tackled a number of times in the academy. Also, moving beyond, a simple first year seminar course, like a standalone 1 credit hour course, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but taking a more in-depth approach. So moving it maybe from non-credit or 1 credit or pass fail to a letter graded, moving it into your general education. Those are all things that institutions have done. So transforming an existing course. Also requiring courses, so requiring a first year seminar. So moving toward designing a first year experience or first year seminar that wouldn't be opt-in, but would be required for students. Moving from talk to action. So moving into a place where you're actually taking action on the things that you've been talking about related to first year students and first year student success. So for example, there's one institution that I worked with that said belonging was really important. And then they decided to create a day of belonging for their first year students. And then it became a campus-wide event. And now they just had their second day of belonging. So this came out of their first year, their experience that they had in the academy. And it came out of their first year seminar. It was something that they wanted to do, and then it became a campus event. So they've had 2 of those. I also was just talking to an institution that was in one of our first cohorts for the academy, and they have created a quality enhancement plan around their first year seminar that they developed in pilot version in this academy. So these are all things that move from talk to action. We're actually going to do something and implement it. So that's been really inspirational. And I think that I've covered everything else on the slide. So of supporting students as they prepare for the rigors of higher education. So other institutions that have worked with us have focused on this, and I'm working with an institution right now that's been involved in our work that is doing this. So they're thinking about how their course and then their first year experience, because they have a year-long experience, they have 2 courses, but how their first year seminar and the second semester seminar can help students in terms of not only developing academic skills, many of them have them, but understanding which academic skills they might need to call upon and how to use them, and then how to seek help when they need it. So their focus is on making sure that the students are using their skills, but also that they have habits and dispositions associated with successful students at that institution. So that's been really inspiring too. Felita, you've worked with these institutions too. Or do you have any additions about some of these, the things that folks have done with us?
So I'll talk a little bit about maybe how I think they made it to this success. Those institutions that gave really thoughtful consideration to the team members and then were able to do the work between meetings. This is a sort of fast-paced academy. It's only a couple of weeks long, but if you really dedicate the time to doing the work and asking the questions and getting the information you need, I've seen some great success. But it does take just that bit of dedication. And so I want to, just be honest and give fair warning. It does take a little work on your part and a lot of work on our part to make sure we meet your needs. But with those two things meeting in the middle, that's why we've seen some great success. That would be my comment.
Thank you so much, Felita. And Cindy is new to the team, but Cindy, feel free to jump in if you have any comments or feedback, particularly from your perspective as a participant.
I would just add that I'm struck by the number of campuses that may have broad interests that need the academy to help shape priorities, and then also campuses that have very clear interests and come in with, can you help us move from thought into action? And the fact there's room for everyone in this type of academy, and that's pretty fantastic. I did want to add too, when it comes to teams, our campus did this a little uniquely where we had a group of academic affairs staff and faculty that had one very concrete agenda item, and then a group of folks from different divisions that didn't. So we actually had two subgroups participating in the academy where we kind of split off into the smaller groups and then came together on the broader agenda items. And it worked really well. We thought we were kind of doing something strange, but it really helped us to make sure that all of the agenda items got addressed in the academy.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I love that. And I think that sort of a model is very promising when we think about approaching the first year, having those groups and then tackling it, kind of wrapping your arms around it from both sides. I think makes a lot of sense. I love that. All right, Katie, I see you popped on camera. This is Katie's slide, and she's going to talk to you about the application process and the fees. But first, I want to say really quickly, these are the synchronous meetings. Katie will talk about those in a moment. They are recorded. So if you have team members who are unable to be present for every single one, or if you yourself are unable to be present for the entire session, that's not a problem. We will record those and post them in our learning management system, Brightspace. I know that's a question we often get. So Katie, I'm turning it over to you now.
Thanks, Steph. My internet has been really unstable. I think we're getting some lashings of rain. So if I freeze or disappear, just let me know if you can't hear me. But so far today, people can hear me. They just sometimes see a weird looking face because it freezes. So the next steps, how do you get involved in the academy? The application link is here. We will also send you an email that will have all of these things for you. We do have an application process. It is not a complicated process. Really, what we want to make sure is your goals in joining the academy match the outcomes of the academy. That's what the application does, is it just makes sure it's a good fit. And then once you complete that application, you'll hear back from us within a couple of days, and we'll discuss with you the next process, which is the executing the contract and making arrangements for the fees. The fees are based on your undergraduate enrollment as determined by College Navigator. And it is possible for you to split those fees into 2 different fiscal years if that can help make participation a little bit easier for you. So really, it's just a simple process. It's 4-question application. None of them do we want more than 250 words for. So you're not writing an essay. Really, it's just, what are your goals with the academy, and then making sure that it fits, and then just getting things on board, and then getting started with the meetings in September. And as Steph said, the synchronous meetings are listed here, and they will all be available via recording asynchronously. And I'm happy to answer any questions about fees or anything like that that you may have. And then, thank you, Steph. So we do always like to stop and just give a brief list of some of the other things that we offer. I'm not going to go through the list, but sometimes, because we do offer about 20 and really in different iterations, probably closer to 30 different things, and it's easy to end up in the wrong info session, like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. And so if that has happened to you, though it doesn't sound like, because both Jenny and Jennifer have clearly articulated why you're here, but these are the other processes and academies. If there is something that you're interested in and you're not sure whether you should start with this one or something else, we would be happy to get together the right people in the room with you to help you understand the differences and make those decisions. I think that's it. Thank you. And I managed to not freeze, so.
We should probably also mention that we have a symposium coming up next month. So if you all are interested, it's an in-person meeting as well. So it's like a conference, and we have a track on the first year. So if you're interested, you can check that out, and we can give you more information. We'll include that in the mailing with the slides and the recording.
Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome. Yeah, Chicago close to home, Jennifer. I was looking at the participant list, so that's why I mentioned it, because it would be too far off there. And Jennifer said that she's interested in the retention and redesign information as well.
So Jennifer, I will make sure that I get you that information, and I am happy to set up some time with you to discuss. I think it's Cindy Kane who's now leading that effort. So we can pull together some time and have that discussion.
All right, and now we have some time if you're interested in any questions, and we're happy to pause the recording here, because I know there may be some things that you all would like to ask of us that you don't want to have in the recording, so we can pause that and stop the share and just hang out